I always believed I was a good judge of character. For 30 years as the CEO of Marguerite's Essentials, a boutique perfume company in Washington, D.C., I'd hired hundreds of people and rarely misjudged anyone. But I failed spectacularly where it mattered most, with the woman my only son chose to marry. That Monday morning in April began like any other. Benjamin had stayed overnight at our Georgetown townhouse after a late business dinner. As managing director at Wilcox Financial, his schedule was punishing, and these impromptu stays at his childhood home had become our precious moments to reconnect. Clara, his wife of 5 years, had joined us for breakfast before heading to her own job at a prestigious art gallery. "I made your favorites," she'd said, sliding a sleek black lunchbox toward Benjamin across our marble kitchen island. Her smile was perfect. Practiced, I would later realize. Roasted salmon with that dill sauce you love, and that quinoa salad from the place on M Street. Benjamin had kissed her cheek. "You spoil me." I remembered watching them, feeling that warm glow of satisfaction that comes from seeing your child settled and happy. My own identical lunchbox, a birthday gift from Benjamin, sat nearby, already packed with the spinach quiche I'd prepared the night before. It was Clara who noticed first. "Oh, Margaret, we have the same containers." She laughed, her slender fingers brushing back a strand of honey blonde hair. "We should mark them somehow." "Next time," I replied, gathering my things for work. "I'm running late for the quarterly projections meeting." In the flurry of goodbye kisses and last-minute phone calls, the lunchboxes were grabbed hastily. It was only when I arrived at my office and set my bag down that a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Had I taken the right one? But the morning's avalanche of emails and conference calls pushed the thought aside until noon, when my assistant Renee knocked on my door. "Lunch? Break, Margaret. Don't forget to eat something. You've been in meetings since 7. I nodded gratefully and reached for the lunchbox. Just as I was about to open it, David Mercer appeared in my doorway. David was a retired physician who now consulted for my company on the medical properties of our organic essential oil blends. At 72, with his shock of white hair and perpetually kind eyes, he was both a trusted colleague and a dear friend. "Margaret, do you have those safety reports for the new lavender formulation? The FDA liaison is waiting." He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on the lunchbox. Something in his expression made my blood run cold. "What is it?" I asked. David stepped into my office and closed the door. "That's Benjamin's lunch, isn't it? Clara's black container?" "Yes. We mixed them up this morning." "How did you know?" He moved closer, his usually steady hands trembling slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside lay an elegant arrangement of pink salmon, vibrant greens, and what looked like a sprinkle of herbs or seasoning over the top. David's face drained of color so quickly I stood up in alarm. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice a shaken rasp that turned my spine to ice. "You need to get your son to the ER immediately." The office seemed to shrink around me. "What do you mean? Why?" His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen in all our years of friendship. Pure, unfiltered fear. That food could kill him. For a suspended moment, I couldn't breathe. The sounds of the office. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the distant hum of conversation, all faded to a dull roar in my ears. "I don't understand," I managed to say, though a terrible understanding was already forming in the darkest corners of my mind. David closed the lid carefully, as if handling a bomb. "Look at the white substance on top. That's not salt or herbs, Margaret. I'm almost certain it's arsenic." "Arsenic?" The word hung between us. Impossible and horrifying. "No, that can't be right. Clara wouldn't—" "Has Benjamin been sick lately?" David interrupted, his clinical instincts taking over. "Unexplained stomach issues, fatigue, headaches, hair loss." My hand flew to my mouth. "Yes, for months now. We thought it was stress from work." David's expression confirmed my worst fears before he even spoke. Classic arsenic poisoning. Symptoms: gradual, easily mistaken for other conditions. "Margaret, this isn't a mistake." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my desk, suddenly aware of how fragile life could be, how everything I loved could be snatched away by the most trusted hands. "Call him," David urged. "Now." With trembling fingers, I dialed Benjamin's number. Each ring seemed to stretch into eternity. When his voicemail answered, panic clawed at my chest. "Try his office," David suggested. His assistant answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Wilcox, Benjamin left for an early lunch meeting with clients. He should be back by 2. "Did he take his lunch with him?" I asked, desperate. No, ma'am, it's right here on his desk. Relief washed over me so powerfully I nearly collapsed into my chair. Thank God, I breathed. David placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. We need to have that food tested immediately. And Margaret, we need to call the police. The word police shattered whatever remained of my denial. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. If David was right, and deep in my heart I knew he was, Clara had been systematically poisoning my son. Why? I whispered, the question directed not at David, but at the universe. What reason could she possibly have? David's answer came like a knife to my heart. You know why, Margaret? Your company, your estate. Benjamin is your sole heir. And just like that, pieces began falling into place. Terrible, jagged pieces that formed a picture so dark I could barely look at it. Benjamin and Clara's whirlwind romance 5 years ago. Her curious questions about my will. Her insistence that Benjamin see a particular doctor. Her friend from college when his symptoms began. The life insurance policy she'd convinced him to increase last year. I trusted her, I said, my voice hollow with betrayal. I welcomed her into my family. David closed the lunchbox and slipped it into a plastic bag from my desk drawer. Trust is what makes this kind of betrayal possible, he said grimly. Call Benjamin. Tell him to meet us at Georgetown University Hospital. I have contacts there who will handle this discreetly. As I reached for my phone again, a terrible thought struck me. Clara knew Benjamin was staying at my house last night. She'd prepared his lunch knowing he would take it to work. She'd seen our identical lunchboxes. David, I said, my voice barely audible. What if the mix-up wasn't an accident? What if she wanted me to take his lunch today? The silence that followed answered my question more clearly than words ever could. I wasn't just facing the betrayal of a daughter-in-law attempting to murder my son. I might also have been her target all along. The next hours passed in a blur of clinical lights and hushed conversations. I'd managed to reach Benjamin, fabricating an urgent family matter that required him to meet me at Georgetown University Hospital. His voice had been concerned but unsuspecting, the voice of a man who had no idea his world was about to implode. When he arrived, confusion etched across his handsome face. I couldn't find the words. How do you tell your only child that the woman he loves has been slowly poisoning him to death? Dr. Eleanor Santos, a toxicologist and old friend of David's, took charge with a gentle efficiency that anchored me in the storm. She ushered us into a private consultation room, the infamous lunchbox sealed in an evidence bag between us. Benjamin, she began, her voice calm but grave, I need to run some tests on you immediately. Dr. Mercer has reason to believe you may have been exposed to arsenic poisoning. Benjamin's blue eyes, so like his father's, widened in disbelief. Arsenic? That's ridiculous. From where? The silence that followed was deafening. I reached for his hand, feeling the slight tremor in his fingers that I'd attributed to stress for months. Your lunch, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. The one Clara prepared. He jerked back as if I'd slapped him. Mom, what are you saying? You can't possibly think. Benjamin, David interjected gently. Your symptoms over the past several months are consistent with gradual arsenic exposure. The fatigue, the digestive issues, the unexplained rashes. That's stress, Benjamin insisted, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. I work 70-hour weeks. Dr. Santos leaned forward. Let's start with blood and urine tests. If there's arsenic in your system, we'll find it. Meanwhile, we'll analyze the food sample. Benjamin ran a hand through his dark hair. Thinner now than it had been a year ago, I realized with a pang. Another symptom I'd missed. This is insane, he muttered, but he rolled up his sleeve for the nurse who entered with collection equipment. While Benjamin underwent testing, David and I sat in tense silence in the waiting area. The hospital sounds washed over us, beeping monitors, squeaking shoes on linoleum, the distant chime of an elevator. Normal sounds in a world that had suddenly turned abnormal. I should have seen it, I said finally, staring at my clasped hands. All these months, watching him get sicker. I should have known something wasn't right. David's weathered hand covered mine. Clara was careful. Arsenic poisoning is notoriously difficult to detect when administered gradually. The symptoms mimic so many other conditions. But I'm his mother. The words caught in my throat. I'm supposed to protect him. And you did, David countered. Today, you may have saved his life. 3. Agonizing hours later, Dr. Santos returned with a tablet in hand and a grim expression that confirmed everything I'd feared. The preliminary tests show elevated arsenic levels in Benjamin's system, she said without preamble. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. And the food sample? She glanced down at her tablet. Significant arsenic contamination. Enough that repeated exposure would eventually cause organ failure. Benjamin sat perfectly still, his face ashen. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely recognizable. Clara has been poisoning me. Not a question. A statement of fact he was forcing himself to accept. Dr. Santos nodded. The evidence suggests deliberate poisoning over an extended period. We've notified law enforcement, but they'll need your cooperation to build a case. A case, Benjamin echoed hollowly. Against my wife. The word wife hung in the air between us, now twisted into something unrecognizable. The woman he'd vowed to spend his life with had been systematically taking that life away, one carefully prepared meal at a time. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Clara's smiling face appeared on the screen. My stomach lurched. Don't answer, David said quickly. Let the police handle this. But Benjamin reached for the phone, his expression hardening into something I'd never seen before. No. If we don't answer, she'll know something's wrong. He took a deep breath. We need to act normal until we figure out what to do. He pressed the answer button, putting it on speaker. Hey, babe. Clara's voice flowed through the speaker, honey-sweet and concerned. Ben? I just checked with your office. They said you left for a family emergency? Is everything okay? The performance in her voice, the perfect modulation of worry, made my skin crawl. Yeah. Sorry I didn't call. Mom felt dizzy at work, so I'm taking her to get checked out. Just a precaution. The lie rolled off Benjamin's tongue smoothly, his training in high-stakes financial negotiations serving him well. Oh no, poor Margaret. Which hospital? I'll come right away. Benjamin's knuckles whitened around the phone. No need. It's probably just low blood pressure. I'll bring her home when they're done. Are you sure? I could bring dinner. You must be starving since you missed lunch. My blood ran cold at the thought of what dinner might contain. Actually, we grabbed something here. Listen, the doctor's coming back. I'll call you later, okay? All right. Love you, she said, the 3 syllables now sounding like the most obscene phrase I'd ever heard. Love you too, Benjamin replied, and then ended the call. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode, then rushed to the small bathroom in the corner of the room and retched violently. When he emerged, his face was wet and his eyes blazed with a terrible clarity. Detective Carter is on his way, Dr. Santos said softly. He specializes in domestic cases. Benjamin nodded mechanically. I need to understand why. Was it the money? My life insurance? He turned to me. Your company? The questions hung heavy in the sterile air. I thought of my will, revised after Benjamin's marriage to include Clara as a secondary beneficiary in the event of Benjamin's death. A standard provision suggested by my attorney, meant to protect a beloved daughter-in-law in case of tragedy. Instead, it had provided motivation for murder. Before I could respond, a tall man in a crisp suit appeared in the doorway. His grave expression and the badge clipped to his belt identified him as Detective Marcus Carter before he even introduced himself. Mr. and Mrs. Wilcox? His deep voice was surprisingly gentle. I understand you've had quite a shock today. If you're up for it, I'd like to hear exactly what happened. As we recounted the day's events, Detective Carter took meticulous notes, his face betraying nothing. When we finished, he tucked away his notebook and regarded us thoughtfully. In cases like this, solid evidence is crucial. You've got the tainted food, which is excellent, and the medical tests. But proving intent, proving that Mrs. Benjamin Wilcox deliberately poisoned her husband, will be challenging. Benjamin straightened, a new determination in his posture. What do we need to do? Detective Carter's eyes flickered between us. Something that might be difficult for you both. Something that requires absolute secrecy and control. Anything, I said, feeling strength return to my voice. Whatever it takes to protect my son. The detective leaned forward, lowering his voice. We need to catch her in the act. And to do that, Mr. Wilcox, you need to go home tonight and pretend nothing has changed. Benjamin's face paled again, but he nodded. You want me to let her keep thinking she's getting away with it? Precisely, Carter confirmed. And meanwhile, we'll be watching every move she makes. As we formulated a plan to expose Clara's deadly intentions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The shock and horror hadn't diminished, but they were joined now by something else. A fierce, protective resolve that burned away all uncertainty. Clara had chosen the wrong family to destroy. She might have been patient in her poisoning, but she was about to discover that a mother's patience in protecting her child was infinitely greater. The next morning, I sat in my office, staring blankly at the financial reports that would normally command my full attention. The numbers blurred before my eyes as I recalled Benjamin's ashen face when he left the hospital yesterday, steeling himself to return home to Clara. "I can do this," he'd assured Detective Carter. "I've negotiated billion-dollar deals with sharks who would sell their mothers for a percentage point. I can certainly pretend everything's normal with my wife for a few days." But this wasn't business. This was his life, his heart, his home. And Clara wasn't just any adversary. She was the woman he had promised to love forever, who now stood revealed as his would-be murderer. My phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. "Breakfast normal. Taking vitamins she gave me but palming them. Going to office. Detectives team installing cameras while we're out. You okay?" I typed back quickly, "I'm fine. Be careful. Love you." 3 simple sentences that couldn't begin to express the tornado of emotions ripping through me. Fear, rage, heartbreak, and an overwhelming protective instinct I hadn't felt so powerfully since Benjamin was a small boy. David appeared in my doorway, his kind face lined with concern. "Any news?" I gestured for him to come in and close the door. "They're setting up surveillance today. Benjamin's at work, acting as if nothing happened." My voice caught. "David, he has to sit across from her at dinner tonight. He has to smile and kiss her goodnight, knowing—" David settled into the chair opposite my desk. "Benjamin is stronger than you think, Margaret, and he's not alone in this. I should be there with him." "No," David said firmly. "Clara would be instantly suspicious if you suddenly inserted yourself into their evening routine. You need to maintain normal patterns too." He was right, of course. Any deviation from our usual behavior could alert Clara. Still, the thought of Benjamin facing this alone made my chest ache with a physical pain. "What kind of person does this?" I whispered, the question that had been haunting me since yesterday. How could she share his bed, plan their future, all while systematically poisoning him? David's expression darkened. "In my years of practice, I encountered similar cases. They're rare, but not as rare as we'd like to think. There's a particular type of person who can compartmentalize like that, who can serve a poisoned meal with genuine-seeming affection. A sociopath," I said flatly. "Perhaps. Or sometimes just someone so fixated on a goal that human connections become secondary. Either way, Clara has demonstrated she's capable of extraordinary deception. Don't underestimate her, Margaret." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone lit up with Clara's name. I showed the screen to David, who nodded encouragingly. "Remember, everything is normal," he mouthed as I answered. "Clara, hi," I said, infusing my voice with the warmth I'd always felt for her before yesterday. The performance made me nauseated. "Margaret, I'm just checking on you. Ben said you were feeling dizzy yesterday. Are you better today?" Her concern sounded so genuine that for a wild, disorienting moment, I questioned everything. Could there be some terrible mistake? But then I remembered the arsenic in the salmon, Benjamin's thinning hair, his months of unexplained illness. "Much better, thank you," I replied. "Just needed to hydrate properly. You know how I get absorbed in work and forget to drink enough water." "That's a relief," Clara said, her voice honey smooth. "Listen, I was thinking, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? I'm making Ben's favorite pasta, and it would be nice for the 3 of us to have some quality time." My blood turned to ice. Benjamin's favorite? Pasta. Would it contain the same deadly seasoning as yesterday's salmon? Was Clara now targeting me more directly, worried that I might have noticed something? "That sounds lovely," I managed to say. "What time should I come?" 7? I have a client meeting at the gallery until 6. "Perfect. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Clara said warmly. "I'm taking care of everything else." "I bet you are," I thought darkly. When the call ended, I immediately texted Detective Carter and Benjamin about the dinner invitation. Carter's response came within minutes. "Accept. Good opportunity. We'll have team on standby." Benjamin's reply took longer. "Okay, we're ready." By 6:45 that evening, I was parking outside Benjamin and Clara's elegant townhouse in Capitol Hill. The red brick exterior with, its glossy black door had always seemed so welcoming. Now it loomed before me like the entrance to a beautifully appointed trap. Detective Carter had briefed me thoroughly. Miniature cameras had been installed in the kitchen and dining room that morning by officers posing as pest control workers, a service regularly scheduled for homes in this historic neighborhood. The footage was feeding directly to a surveillance van parked around the corner. "Act completely normal," Carter had instructed. Eat what she serves, but find subtle ways to avoid consuming much. Compliment the food excessively while pushing it around your plate. Claim you had a late lunch, anything that won't raise suspicion. As I approached the door, I forced my features into a pleasant expression and reminded myself that I had built a successful business by being able to negotiate through difficult situations. This was just another negotiation, with the highest stakes imaginable. Clara opened the door before I could knock, embracing me warmly. She wore a cream cashmere sweater and slim black pants, her honey blonde hair twisted into an elegant chignon. She looked like the perfect daughter-in-law, the woman I had been, proud to welcome into our family. "Margaret, come in." Ben's opening wine in the kitchen. I stepped into the foyer, breathing in the familiar scent of the lemongrass candles Clara always burned. The house was immaculate as usual, with fresh flowers on the console table and soft jazz playing in the background. Benjamin appeared from the kitchen, 2 glasses of red wine in hand. Our eyes met. Briefly, a flash of shared knowledge quickly masked as he leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Hey, Mom. Feeling better?" "Much better," I confirmed, accepting the wine. I noticed he wasn't drinking any himself. Not joining us? A flicker of something, panic, crossed his face before he smoothed it away. "Taking it easy tonight. Still have that client presentation to finish later." Clara slipped her arm through his, the picture of wifely devotion. "He's been working too hard. I keep telling him to delegate more." The casual intimacy of the gesture, knowing what we now knew, made my stomach turn. How could she touch him so tenderly while systematically destroying his body from within? "Something smells wonderful," I said, following them toward the kitchen where steam rose from pots on the professional-grade stove Clara had insisted on when they renovated. "Wild mushroom pasta with that truffle oil Ben loves," Clara explained, moving to stir a simmering sauce. "And a salad with the pine nuts from that market in Bethesda." I watched her hands carefully as she worked. Elegant, confident movements. The hands of an artist, I'd always thought. Now I saw them as something else. Precise. Instruments of harm, measuring doses of poison with practiced ease. Benjamin caught my gaze and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Not now," his eyes warned. "She hasn't done anything yet." We made small talk about the gallery where Clara worked, my company's latest projections, the unseasonably warm spring weather. The banality of our conversation felt surreal against the backdrop of surveillance and suspicion. When Clara turned to drain the pasta, Benjamin quickly nudged me toward the dining room. "Let me show you the new artwork we got for the wall," he said, a touch too loudly. Once out of earshot, he whispered urgently, "Carter says they've already found arsenic in her bathroom cabinet, hidden in an aspirin bottle. They're documenting everything but waiting to see if she uses it tonight." My hand flew to my mouth. "Oh God, Benjamin." "Stay calm," he murmured, squeezing my arm. "We're almost through this." We returned to the kitchen just as Clara was plating the pasta. I watched with horrified fascination as she sprinkled what looked like freshly grated cheese over each serving, Benjamin's portion receiving a noticeably more generous dusting. "Special Parmesan for, you," she said, placing the plate before him with a loving smile. "From that Italian market you love." My heart hammered against my ribs so violently I was certain Clara must hear it. That wasn't Parmesan, or at least not only Parmesan. Benjamin smiled up at her, the perfect picture of an appreciative husband. "Looks amazing, babe. You spoil me." We settled at the dining table, Clara pouring more, wine for herself and me while Benjamin sipped water. The pasta steamed invitingly before us, the aroma rich and earthy. Under different circumstances, I would have been eager to taste it. "Shall we?" Clara said, lifting her fork. Benjamin and I followed suit. I twirled a small amount of pasta, careful to avoid the cheese as much as possible, and brought it to my lips without actually putting it in my mouth. Benjamin went further, taking a generous bite and chewing appreciatively. My heart nearly stopped. We were supposed to avoid eating the food. What was he doing? "Delicious," Benjamin pronounced, taking another bite. Clara beamed at him, then turned expectantly to me. I mimicked eating, making appropriate noises of enjoyment while discreetly transferring most of my food to a napkin in my lap. As the meal progressed, I watched in mounting horror as Benjamin continued to eat, complimenting Clara effusively between bites. Had he lost his mind? Was he so committed to the charade that he was willing to poison himself? It wasn't until Clara excused herself to use the restroom that I could finally hiss, "What are you doing? You can't actually eat that." Benjamin leaned forward, speaking rapidly. "It's okay. Carter had a doctor give me something this morning, some kind of chelating agent that binds to the arsenic, and I've been building up a tolerance, apparently, from the small doses. His expression hardened. Besides, we need conclusive evidence. We need to be able to prove the food contained arsenic and that I consumed it. The bathroom door opened and he straightened, his mask of normalcy sliding back into place as Clara returned. "Who's ready for dessert?" she asked brightly. "I made that chocolate mousse you both love." As we smiled and nodded, accepting our delicate crystal dishes of what might well be poison, I realized we had crossed a threshold. There was no going back from this moment, from this knowledge. Either Clara would be exposed tonight, or Benjamin might not survive to see another dinner in this beautiful home they had built together. When I left Benjamin and Clara's townhouse that night, the weight of our performance sat heavy on my shoulders. We'd made it through dessert with our masks intact, Benjamin consuming most of his potentially laced chocolate mousse, me finding creative ways to dispose of mine in napkins, and, when Clara wasn't looking, a potted plant by the dining table. "Text me when you get home safely," Clara had called from the doorway, her concerned expression so convincing that for a moment, I almost doubted everything again. Almost. Detective Carter had arranged for a plainclothes officer to follow me home, though he assured me Clara wasn't likely to make a move against me directly. Not yet. "She's too methodical," he'd explained during our briefing. "Based on the evidence we're gathering, she's planning a long game with Benjamin as the primary target." The next morning dawned gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I prepared for another day of pretending. The waiting was excruciating. How long would we need to maintain this charade? How many more poisoned meals would Benjamin have to consume? Before we had enough evidence to arrest Clara? My phone rang just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Detective Carter's number. "We've got something," he said without preamble. "Benjamin's blood test from last night shows elevated arsenic levels again, confirming ingestion from the pasta. And we've been monitoring Clara's online activity." He paused, his voice tightening. "She's been researching life insurance payouts and inheritance law. Specifically, what happens when a beneficiary dies before collecting." My hand trembled so violently that coffee sloshed over the rim of my cup. "She's planning to kill him soon. It appears that way. We've also discovered substantial withdrawals from their joint accounts over the past 6 months. Money transferred to an account in her maiden name only. She's preparing to run," I said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Exactly. Which means we need to move quickly. I'd like to set up the final phase of our operation tonight. What do you need me to do?" "Benjamin mentioned a charity gala this weekend. Something about the National Gallery." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Yes, the annual spring fundraiser. We all have tickets." "Perfect. We'll make our move there. Public enough to contain the situation, but controlled enough to ensure everyone's safety." Carter's voice became grim. "In the meantime, Benjamin needs to play his role one last time. Tonight, we need him to appear to be getting much sicker. Dramatically sicker." "You want him to fake severe symptoms?" I realized. "Yes. If Clara believes her plan is finally working, she might get careless, make a mistake, say something incriminating." Cold determination settled over me. "I'll call him now." The plan came together with military precision over the next few hours. Benjamin would return home early from work, complaining of severe stomach pains and dizziness. I would arrive shortly after, playing the concerned mother. And while Clara was distracted with our performance, Detective Carter's team would search the house more thoroughly for her stash of arsenic and any other evidence they could find. By 4:30 that afternoon, I was pacing my living room, waiting for Benjamin's signal to drive to their house. My phone chimed with a text. "Coming home now. She's there. Operation is go." I grabbed my purse and keys, a strange calm settling over me as I headed for my car. This was ending today, one way or another. When I arrived at Benjamin and Clara's townhouse 20 minutes later, the front door stood open. I could hear Clara's voice, pitched high with what sounded like genuine concern. "Benjamin, please, let me help you to bed. You shouldn't have driven home like this." I stepped into the foyer to find Benjamin leaning heavily against the wall, his face alarmingly pale, a convincing performance of a man in serious physical distress. "Mom," he croaked when he saw me. "Sorry. Called you. Getting worse." Clara whirled toward me, her eyes wide. "Margaret, thank God you're here. He just got home like this. He's burning up and can barely stand." I rushed forward, playing my part. "Benjamin, what's happening? Should we call an ambulance?" Clara hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but enough for me to catch it. "Let's get him to bed first." Maybe it's just a severe flu. Just a flu. As if she didn't know exactly what was happening to him. We helped Benjamin upstairs to the master bedroom, where he collapsed onto the king-sized bed with a convincing groan of pain. I placed my hand on his forehead, genuinely alarmed by how cold and clammy his skin felt. He wasn't entirely acting, I realized. The stress of the situation was taking a physical toll. We should call Dr. Matthews, Clara suggested, naming the physician she had recommended when Benjamin first started experiencing symptoms months ago. The same doctor who had consistently diagnosed Benjamin with work-related stress and acid reflux. No, I said firmly. I'm calling an ambulance. This isn't normal. Clara's composure slipped just slightly. A tightening around her eyes. A subtle stiffening of her shoulders. Don't you think that's overreacting? Hospitals are full of actually sick people. If it's just a stomach bug? Look at him, Clara. I gestured to Benjamin, who had curled into a fetal position, his breathing labored. This isn't a stomach bug. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, ignoring Clara's increasingly agitated objections. What I didn't tell her was that this call had been prearranged. The paramedics who would respond would actually be Detective Carter and his partner, disguised in official uniforms. While we waited for the ambulance, Clara hovered nervously around Benjamin, alternating between solicitous concern when I was watching and distracted glances at her watch when she thought I wasn't. Maybe I should make him some tea, she suggested. Something to settle his stomach. Don't bother, I said, perhaps a bit too sharply. He can't keep anything down right now. The sound of sirens approaching saved me from having to maintain our facade much longer. Clara visibly tensed at the noise, then quickly composed herself, smoothing her hair and straightening her blouse before going downstairs to meet the paramedics. I leaned close to Benjamin. You're doing great, I whispered. Carter's here. Just a little longer. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his eyes communicating what he couldn't say aloud. End this. Today. The next hour unfolded with the surreal quality of a well-rehearsed play. Detective Carter and his partner, convincing in their paramedic disguises, loaded Benjamin into an actual ambulance while peppering Clara with questions about his symptoms and medical history. I watched her carefully construct her answers, concerned enough to appear the devoted wife, vague enough to avoid raising suspicions about long-term poisoning. We'll take him to Georgetown University Hospital, Carter announced, helping me into the back of the ambulance beside Benjamin's gurney. Mrs. Wilcox, you can follow in your car. For a moment, panic flashed across Clara's perfect features. I should ride with him, she protested. He's my husband. There's only room for one family member, and his mother's already inside, Carter's partner replied smoothly. We need to move quickly. You can meet us there. As the ambulance doors closed on Clara's conflicted face, I felt a surge of vindication. She wasn't concerned about Benjamin. She was concerned about being separated from her victim, about losing control of the situation. She'll follow us, Benjamin murmured once we were moving, sitting up slightly on the gurney. She can't risk not knowing what happens. Detective Carter nodded grimly from the driver's seat. That's exactly what we're counting on. At Georgetown University Hospital, everything had been arranged in advance. We were escorted not to the emergency room, but to a private area where Dr. Santos waited with several police officers and a court stenographer. The hospital room had been prepared with hidden cameras and microphones, everything in place to capture what we hoped would be Clara's undoing. Now we wait, Dr. Santos said, checking Benjamin's vital signs for appearance's sake. Your wife has been directed to the main waiting area. When she's brought in, Benjamin, you need to appear unconscious, but stable. Benjamin nodded, settling back against the pillows. The strain of the past few days showed clearly on his face. This wasn't just an act anymore. The physical and emotional toll of pretending normalcy with the woman who had been poisoning him had left visible marks. I'll be right here, I promised, taking his hand. It's almost over. 20 minutes later, a soft knock at the door signaled Clara's arrival. She entered hesitantly, her concerned expression firmly in place as she took in the scene. Benjamin lying still with an IV in his arm, me sitting beside him, and Dr. Santos reviewing charts at the foot of the bed. How is he? Clara asked, her voice carefully modulated to convey just the right amount of worry. Dr. Santos looked up with a grave expression that wasn't entirely feigned. Mrs. Wilcox, I'm afraid your husband's condition is quite serious. We've run preliminary tests and his organs are showing signs of significant toxicity. Clara's hand flew to her throat. Toxicity? What does that mean? It means, Detective Carter said, stepping into the room behind her, that Benjamin Wilcox has dangerous levels of arsenic in his system, levels consistent with deliberate poisoning over an extended period. The color drained from Clara's face as she turned to find Carter, displaying his badge. For one brief electric moment, I saw the mask slip completely, revealing cold calculation in those eyes I had once trusted. Then it was back. The shocked innocence, the disbelief. Poisoning, that's insane! Who would poison Benjamin? That's what we intend to find out, Carter replied evenly. We've obtained a warrant to search your home. My officers are there now. Clara's composure cracked like fine porcelain under pressure. Her gaze darted between Benjamin's seemingly unconscious form, Detective Carter's impassive face, and my own unflinching stare. This is absurd, she said, but her voice had lost its customary honey smoothness. Someone's made a terrible mistake. Benjamin has been under tremendous stress at work. His symptoms are consistent with arsenic poisoning, Dr. Santos interrupted, her clinical tone brooking no argument. The blood tests confirm it. This is not stress, Mrs. Wilcox. This is attempted murder. Clara took a step back, her shoulder blades hitting the wall. For a moment, I saw something feral flash across her features, a cornered predator calculating escape routes. I want a lawyer, she said. The words clipped and sudden. Detective Carter nodded. That's your right. But before we proceed with formal charges, there's something you should know. He moved toward Benjamin's bed. Mr. Wilcox, I think we've heard enough. On cue, Benjamin opened his eyes and slowly sat up, removing the IV tube that had never been connected to anything in the first place. The shock on Clara's face was nearly worth all the anguish of the past days. Hello, Clara, Benjamin said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. Ben? Clara whispered, genuine confusion replacing calculation. I don't understand. You were unconscious. You were sick. Not as sick as you wanted me to be, he replied with quiet dignity. We know everything, Clara. The arsenic in my food, the research on my life insurance policy, the money you've been moving to your private account. Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed. Something shifted in her demeanor, the pretense of innocence sliding away like water off glass, revealing a cold, hard surface beneath. You have no proof, she said flatly. Carter stepped forward. Actually, we have quite a lot of proof. The arsenic hidden in your bathroom cabinet, the contaminated food samples from your kitchen, your internet search history, the surveillance footage of you adding white powder to Benjamin's meals. With each piece of evidence Carter listed, Clara seemed to shrink slightly, her shoulders curling inward. But it was the mention of surveillance footage that finally shattered her facade completely. You were in our house, she hissed. You invaded our privacy. To save my son's life, I interjected, unable to remain silent any longer. I stood up, facing the woman I had welcomed into my family, the woman who had systematically tried to murder my only child. How could you, Clara? We trusted you. We loved you. Something like a laugh escaped her, a harsh, brittle sound, nothing like the musical laughter I remembered from family dinners and holiday gatherings. Loved me? She repeated, her voice taking on a mocking edge. You never loved me, Margaret. You tolerated me because Benjamin chose me. I was just an accessory to your perfect mother-son relationship, wasn't I? Benjamin shook his head. That's not true, Clara. My mother welcomed you from day one. As the custodian of your future, Clara snapped. The vessel for your children. The pretty wife who would eventually inherit the Wilcox legacy and pass it on to the next generation. Her gaze slid to me, suddenly calculating again. But there was never going to be a next generation, was there, Margaret? Benjamin didn't tell you that part. A chill ran through me. What is she talking about? I asked Benjamin, who had gone very still. Clara's smile was vicious with triumph. Your perfect son had a vasectomy 3 years ago, right after we got married. He never wanted children, Margaret. He knew how desperately you wanted grandchildren, but he just couldn't bring himself to tell you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Benjamin, whose face had flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. That was private, Clara, he said quietly. Between you and me. Nothing was ever just between you and me, she replied bitterly. Your mother was always there, the third person in our marriage, her expectations, her legacy, her company that you would eventually run, whether you wanted to or not. I sank back into my chair, struggling to process this unexpected turn. Benjamin had never wanted children. He'd had a vasectomy without telling me. It felt like a betrayal. Yet I knew with sudden clarity that the betrayal was mine. I had assumed his life would follow the path I envisioned, without ever truly asking what he wanted. But there was no time to unpack this revelation. Clara was still speaking, her words flowing faster now, as if a dam had broken. I tried to love you, Benjamin. I really did. But you were never fully mine. Always your mother's son first. My husband. Second, she laughed again, that terrible hollow sound. And then I saw the will. Benjamin frowned. What will? Your mother's will, Clara said, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. She left everything to you, of course. The company, the properties, the investments. But there was a clause, a contingency. If you died before her, everything would go to your spouse. Her lips curved in a cold smile to me. Detective Carter moved subtly closer to Clara, his hand near his weapon. I realized with a jolt that she was confessing, offering us the motive, the premeditation, everything the prosecution would need. So you decided to kill him, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. To murder my son for money. Clara shrugged, a gesture so casual it made my blood boil. It wasn't just about the money. It was about freedom. Being free of the Wilcox legacy and all its suffocating expectations. She looked directly at Benjamin. You never loved me the way I needed to be loved. Always distracted. Always worried about disappointing your mother. That doesn't justify murder, Clara, Benjamin said softly. No? She tilted her head. Perhaps not. But it made it easier. Detective, Carter stepped forward. Clara Wilcox, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Benjamin Wilcox. As he recited her rights, 2 uniformed officers entered the room to take her into custody. Clara offered no resistance as they handcuffed her. Her eyes, when they met mine one last time, were empty of remorse. You know what the ironic part is, Margaret? She said as they led her toward the, door. If you hadn't been so controlling, so obsessed with your precious legacy, none of this would have happened. In a way, you created this situation. The accusation stung with the particular pain of partial truth. Had my expectations, my assumptions about Benjamin's life, contributed to the fractures in his marriage? Had I unknowingly helped create the circumstances that led Clara down this dark path? As the door closed behind Clara, a heavy silence fell over the room. Benjamin sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his head bowed. Dr. Santos discreetly excused herself, leaving us alone with the weight of all that had been revealed. I'm sorry, Benjamin said finally. About the vasectomy. About not telling you. I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in mine. Why didn't you? He sighed, a sound that carried years of unspoken burdens. I never wanted children, Mom. Not the way you did. But I knew how important grandchildren were to you. Continuing the Wilcox name, passing on the company to the next generation. I couldn't bear to disappoint you. The realization that my son had been carrying this secret to protect my feelings hit me with a wave of sadness. How many other desires and truths had he hidden to meet my expectations? Benjamin, I said gently. Nothing. Not grandchildren, not the company, nothing. Is more important to me than your happiness. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I know that now. But for a long time, I thought your love was conditional on me fulfilling the future you'd planned. And Clara? Did you love her? Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. I thought I did. But looking back, I think we both married each other for the wrong reasons. She wanted the security and status of the Wilcox name. And he hesitated. I wanted someone who seemed to love me just for being me, not for being your son or the future CEO of Marguerite's Essentials. The words were like a knife to my heart, but I forced myself to listen, to truly hear what my son was telling me. Had I been so focused on my vision for his future that I'd failed to see him as his own person, with his own dreams? What do you want, Benjamin? I asked, perhaps for the first time in his adult life. Not what you think I want for you. What do you want? He seemed startled by the question, as if it had never occurred to him that his desires might take precedence. I don't know, he admitted. I've spent so long trying to meet everyone else's expectations that I'm not sure what I want anymore. A small, sad smile crossed his face. But I think I'd like the chance to find out. Detective Carter returned then, his expression grave but satisfied. She's being processed now. I have to say, I've never seen a confession quite like that. It's as if she was relieved to finally drop the act. Will it hold up in court? I asked. With the evidence we've gathered and her explicit admission of intent? Absolutely. She'll be facing attempted murder charges, possibly aggravated by the long-term nature of the poisoning. He turned to Benjamin. You should know, Mr. Wilcox. The search of your home turned up a journal. Clara's journal. She'd been documenting the poisoning, tracking your symptoms, calculating dosages. Benjamin closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this final confirmation of his wife's methodical betrayal. Thank you, detective, he said, for everything. As Carter left to complete the necessary paperwork, I found myself staring at the hospital room door, thinking of Clara being led away, in handcuffs. Despite everything she'd done, everything she'd planned to do, I felt an unexpected twinge of pity. Not for her actions, those were unforgivable, but for the damaged person beneath the perfect facade. What happens now? Benjamin asked, his voice small in the sterile room. I squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse of life beneath my fingers, the life that had so nearly been extinguished by Clara's calculated cruelty. Now we heal, I said simply. Together. The days following Clara's arrest passed in a blur of police statements, legal consultations, and uncomfortable revelations. Benjamin moved back into my Georgetown townhouse temporarily, the memory-laden walls of his Capitol Hill home now tainted by betrayal. Each night I'd hear him pacing in his old bedroom, the floorboards, creaking under the weight of his restless thoughts. One evening, about a week after Clara's confession, I found him in my home office, staring at our family photos. His fingers traced the silver frame holding a picture from his wedding day. Clara radiant in ivory lace, Benjamin beaming with what we'd all mistaken for uncomplicated happiness. I keep trying to see it, he said without turning. Around. Some sign. Some clue that should have warned me what she was capable of. I moved to stand beside him, my reflection joining his in the glass over Clara's smiling face. We see what we expect to see, Benjamin. What we hope to see. I was a financial analyst before becoming a managing director, he said, his voice hollow with self-recrimination. My entire career is built on spotting. Discrepancies, identifying risks. How did I miss this? Because this wasn't a spreadsheet or an investment portfolio, I replied gently. This was your wife, the person you trusted most in the world. He set the photo face down on the desk. I've been going over everything, every moment, every conversation. Did you know she volunteered to handle all our finances after we got married? She said it was because I was so busy at work. His laugh was brittle. Meanwhile, she was systematically draining our accounts, preparing her escape fund. The divorce papers had been filed immediately, but the legal proceedings would be complicated by the pending criminal charges. Clara's assets had been frozen, her passport surrendered. She remained in custody, having been denied bail due to the calculated nature of her crime and the substantial risk of flight. Benjamin, I said carefully, have you thought about what you'll do after? He looked at me quizzically. After what? The divorce? The trial? After all of it, when this chapter is closed. He sank into my desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted beyond his 36 years. I don't know, Mom. Everything I thought I knew about my life has been, he gestured vaguely, searching for the right word, poisoned. The term hung in the air between us, its literal and metaphorical meanings equally devastating. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, I suggested, perching on the edge of the desk. A clean slate, a chance to rebuild in a way that's authentic to who you really are, not who you thought you should be. Benjamin glanced up, a flicker of interest warming his eyes for the first time in days. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change our relationship forever, hopefully for the better. I've been doing a lot of thinking this week about Clara's accusations. His expression clouded. Mom, you can't take anything she said seriously. She's a sociopath. Even sociopaths can speak truth sometimes, Benjamin, especially when it serves their purpose. I reached for his hand. Was she right? About me being controlling? About my expectations for your life weighing on you? He started to protest, then stopped. Honesty winning out over kindness. Not in the way she made it sound. You never forced me into anything. But, yes, I always felt the pressure to be the son you deserved. To take over the company someday. To marry well. To have children who would carry on the Wilcox name. He hesitated. That's why I couldn't tell you about the vasectomy. The admission hurt, but I nodded, accepting it. I made assumptions about what you wanted without ever really asking. I'm sorry for that, Benjamin. Truly. You're my mother. You wanted what you thought was best for me. But that's just it, I said, squeezing his hand. What I thought was best. Not necessarily what was actually best for you. I smiled ruefully. When your father died, I poured everything into you and the company. They became intertwined in my mind, the twin legacies I was determined to secure. I never stopped to consider that you might want something different for your life. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. I don't even know what I want, he admitted finally. That's the pathetic part. I've spent so long trying to live up to expectations, yours, society's, even Clara's warped ones, that I never developed any real dreams of my own. Then maybe that's what comes next, I suggested, discovering what Benjamin Wilcox truly wants, separate from everyone else's. Visions for his life. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. That sounds terrifying and kind of wonderful. It can be both, I assured him. The following morning, I was surprised to find Benjamin already awake and in the kitchen, brewing coffee with an energy I hadn't seen in months. I've been thinking about what you said, he announced, sliding a mug toward me. About figuring out what I want. I took the coffee gratefully. And? I want to travel. Not luxury hotels and business class. Real travel. The kind where you don't know what's coming next. He leaned against the counter, something new glinting in his eyes. Determination, perhaps. Or hope. Once the divorce is finalized and Clara's trial is over, I'm going to take a sabbatical from Wilcox Financial. Maybe a permanent one. I felt a momentary pang at the thought of Benjamin far away, but it was quickly replaced by genuine happiness for him. That sounds perfect, I said, and meant it. Where will you go first? I was thinking Argentina. Dad always talked about Patagonia, remember? How he regretted never seeing it? The mention of my late husband brought a bittersweet smile to my face. Richard had indeed dreamed of visiting Patagonia, but cancer had claimed him before he could make the journey. He would love that you're going there, I said softly. Benjamin nodded, then hesitated before continuing. There's something else I've been thinking about. The company. Marguerite's essentials. My life's work. The legacy I'd been so determined to pass on to him. What about it? I asked, keeping my tone carefully. Neutral. I don't want to take it over, Mom. Not now, not ever. The words came in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for years. I'm not passionate about perfume or essential oils. I never have been. I participated in all those strategy meetings and product launches because I knew it made you happy, but it's not your dream, I finished for him. He exhaled, relief washing over his features. No, it's not. Instead of disappointment, I felt a curious lightness, as if a burden I hadn't recognized was lifting. I think I've always known that, deep down. I just wasn't ready to admit it. You're not upset? Benjamin, I said, setting down my coffee to take both his hands in mine. After nearly losing you, how could I be upset about something as trivial as business succession? I want you to be happy, truly happy, not just going through the motions of the life I or anyone else planned for you. His eyes glistened suspiciously. Thank you. The doorbell interrupted our moment, and Benjamin quickly wiped his eyes before going to answer it. He returned a moment later, followed by Detective Carter, whose serious expression immediately put me on alert. Good morning, Mrs. Wilcox, Mr. Wilcox, Carter said formally. I apologize for the early visit, but there have been developments in Clara's case that you need to be aware of. Benjamin gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table. What kind of developments? Carter sat, placing a folder on the table between us. Clara has agreed to plead guilty to attempted murder in exchange for avoiding a trial. Given the overwhelming evidence against her, her attorney advised this was her best option. That's good news, isn't it? I asked cautiously. It spares Benjamin having to testify, reliving everything in open court. Yes, Carter agreed. But there's more. He opened the folder, revealing photographs of various documents. As part of our investigation, we obtained warrants for all of Clara's communications. We discovered something concerning. He pointed to what appeared to be email exchanges. Clara wasn't working alone. The kitchen suddenly seemed too small, the air too thin. What do you mean? Benjamin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Carter's expression was grim. She was in regular communication with Dr. Jeffrey Matthews, the physician who consistently misdiagnosed your symptoms over the past year. I gasped. Clara's college friend, the doctor she specifically recommended to Benjamin. Exactly, Carter nodded. Their correspondence dates back over 2 years, well before the poisoning began. We found evidence of a romantic relationship between them, as well as explicit discussions about how to administer arsenic in ways that would appear to be natural. Illness. Benjamin sank into a chair, his face ashen. Matthews was in on it? The whole time? It appears so. Carter confirmed. We arrested him this morning. Based on what we found, Clara planned to collect your life insurance and inheritance, divorce her husband back in Texas. Yes, she has another husband she never divorced, and start a new life with Matthews somewhere abroad. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. Not only had Clara methodically poisoned my son, but she'd enlisted a medical professional, someone bound by oath to do no harm, as her accomplice. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. How? Benjamin began, then stopped, swallowing hard before continuing. How common is this? Couples conspiring to murder a spouse? Carter's expression softened slightly. More common than we'd like to think, but still extremely rare, Mr. Wilcox. What happened to you? The calculated nature of it, the medical accomplice, the financial motive, is exceptional even in my experience. His words were meant to be reassuring, I suppose, but they only underscored the cold reality. Benjamin had been targeted with extraordinary precision by a woman who had never loved him. Only what he represented: access to wealth, status, and eventually inheritance. When will they be sentenced? I asked, practical concerns surfacing through the shock. Given the plea deal, Clara will likely receive 20 to 30 years. Matthews is fighting the charges, but with Clara's testimony against him, he's facing similar time. Carter closed the folder. I wanted you to hear this from me before the press gets hold of it. A doctor involved in a poisoning plot makes for sensational headlines. Benjamin nodded mechanically, his eyes distant. I recognized the look. He was retreating inward, processing this latest blow. After Detective Carter left, promising to keep us updated, Benjamin remained at the kitchen table, staring into his now cold coffee. I can't believe I trusted Matthews with my health, he said finally. He sat across from me looking concerned, prescribing medications that would mask the poisoning symptoms, all while knowing. I moved to his side, resting a hand on his shoulder. You couldn't have known, Benjamin. Neither of us could. 2 years, he muttered. Clara was planning this for at least 2 years. Most of our marriage was a lie. He looked up at me, his expression haunted. How do I ever trust anyone again after this? It was the question that had been lurking beneath the surface of all our conversations since Clara's arrest. How does one rebuild faith in humanity after such a fundamental betrayal? You start small, I said softly. You trust the people who have proven themselves worthy, and you give yourself permission to be cautious with everyone else. Benjamin reached for my hand, squeezing it gratefully. I'm glad you're here, Mom. I don't know how I would get through this otherwise. In that quiet kitchen moment, with morning light filtering through the windows and the weight of betrayal still heavy between us, I made a silent promise to my son. I would be there for him, however he needed me to be, but I would also give him the freedom to discover his own path forward, even if that path led away from everything I had once envisioned for him. Some legacies, I was beginning to understand, were meant to be reimagined rather than merely inherited. 6 months after Clara's arrest, autumn painted Georgetown in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. The crisp October air carried the scent of change, appropriate as everything in my life had transformed since that fateful day when David discovered arsenic in Benjamin's lunch. Clara's sentencing had made headlines across the country. 28 years without possibility of parole for attempted murder with special circumstances, including the methodical nature of the poisoning and the involvement of a medical professional. Dr. Matthews had eventually accepted a plea deal as well, receiving 25 years for his role as accomplice. The media frenzy had been intense. The poisoned perfumer's son, they called it, a sensational tale of greed and betrayal that captivated public imagination. For weeks, reporters had camped outside my townhouse and Benjamin's former home, hungry for statements we refused to give. Eventually, as all storms do, this one passed, giving way to newer scandals and fresher tragedies. In the aftermath, Benjamin and I both sought transformation, separate journeys that somehow brought us closer than we'd ever been. I stood now in my office at Marguerite's Essentials, surrounded by cardboard boxes. After 30 years at the helm of the company I'd built from nothing, I was stepping down as CEO. Not retiring, I wasn't ready for, that, but transitioning to a role as creative director, focusing on the part of the business I'd always loved most, developing new scents. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Renee, my assistant of 15 years, stood in the doorway. The board members are all here, Margaret, she said. Ready when you are. I nodded, straightening my charcoal blazer and taking one last glance around. The office that had been my second home for decades. The view of the Potomac River, the wall of awards and recognitions, the framed photo of me cutting the ribbon at our first flagship store in 1995, all of it represented a chapter that was now closing. "I'm ready," I said, following Renee to the conference room where the board awaited my announcement. 12 faces turned toward me as I entered, some anxious, others curious, all attentive. Most had been with the company for years. They'd helped build Marguerite's Essentials into the respected name it had become. They deserved to hear my plans directly from me. "Thank you all for coming," I began, settling at the head of the long walnut table. "As you know, these past months have been challenging, to say the least, both personally and professionally." Sympathetic nods around the table. The scandal had temporarily affected sales, though our loyal customer base had quickly returned. During this time, I've done a lot of reflection on what matters most to me, and what serves this company best moving forward. I took a deep breath. That's why I've decided to step down as CEO, effective next month. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room, though not as much as I might have expected. Perhaps they'd sensed this coming. "I'm not leaving entirely," I clarified. "I'll be transitioning to the role of creative director, focusing exclusively on product development while stepping away from day-to-day operations." David Mercer, who served on the board in addition to his consulting work, spoke first. "Who will be taking over as CEO?" I smiled. This was the part I was most excited to share. "I'm pleased to announce that Amara Johnson has accepted the position." More murmurs, these of approval. Amara had joined the company 15 years ago as a junior marketing associate and had risen steadily through the ranks to her current position as COO. At 43, she embodied everything I valued in leadership, innovation balanced with pragmatism, ambition tempered by compassion. "Amara brings fresh vision while deeply understanding our company's values," I continued. "Under her leadership, I believe Marguerite's Essentials will not only survive, but thrive in new ways." The transition meeting continued for another hour. Questions answered, concerns addressed, excitement building for this new chapter in the company's story. When it concluded, David lingered behind as the others filed out. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" he asked gently. "This company has been your life's work." "That's precisely why I'm doing it," I replied, gathering my notes. "I don't want it to be my entire life anymore, David. What happened with Clara and Benjamin? It forced me to reevaluate everything, to ask myself if I'd been allocating my time according to what truly matters." He nodded thoughtfully. "And Benjamin? How is he handling all of this?" I smiled, thinking of my son who was currently somewhere in the Peruvian Andes, according to his last email. "He's finding his way, healing, discovering who he is beyond the roles he thought he had to fill." David's kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "And what about you, Margaret? Beyond being a CEO and Benjamin's mother, who are you discovering yourself to be?" The question caught me off guard, though I'd asked myself variations of it many times over recent months. "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted, "but I'm enjoying the process more than I expected." Later that evening, I returned to my townhouse, now quieter since Benjamin had embarked on his travels 3 months ago. His journey had begun in Argentina as planned, then expanded to Chile, Brazil, and now Peru. Each email and occasional video call revealed a man gradually shedding layers of expectation and constraint, his posture looser, his smile more spontaneous, his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. I settled onto my terrace with a glass of wine, opening my laptop to find a new message from him waiting in my inbox. The subject line read, "Mom, I think I found it." Intrigued, I clicked open the email to find several attached photos and a lengthy message. "Mom, I'm writing this from a small hostel in Cusco, where I've been for the past 2 weeks. I meant to stay just 3 days before heading to Machu Picchu, but something happened that changed my plans. Remember how I told you about that abandoned essential oil distillery I stumbled upon in the Sacred Valley? The one where they used to process local plants for medicinal purposes before the owner died? Well, I went back, several times, and I've been talking with the owner's daughter, Lucia, who inherited the property but doesn't have the knowledge or resources to revive it. Here's the thing. I can't stop thinking about it, about the potential there. The local farming community still cultivates many of the plants traditionally used in their remedies, plants with properties that haven't been studied or marketed outside Peru. Lucia showed me her father's notebooks, generations of knowledge about extraction methods and healing properties. For the first time in my life, Mom, I feel genuinely excited about something related to essential oils. Not because it's the family business, not because it's what you'd want, but because I see something unique here. A way to honor traditional knowledge while creating sustainable income for the local community. Lucia and I have been drafting a business plan. We're thinking of a cooperative model, where local farmers would have ownership, shares. We'd focus on small batch, ethically sourced oils with complete transparency about origins and extraction methods. Nothing like the mass production that dominates the market. I know what you're thinking. Your financial analyst's son suddenly interested in essential oils? Trust me, I'm as surprised as you are. But it feels right in a way nothing in my previous life ever did. I'm not asking for your approval, Mom, or your financial backing, though I know you'd offer it. I'm telling you because I wanted you to know that I think I found my path. Ironically, one that circles back to yours, but on my own terms. What do you think? Love, Benjamin. I read the email twice. Emotions washing over me in waves. Pride, joy, and yes, a touch of irony that Benjamin had found passion in a field, adjacent to mine, but in his own unique way. Not as my successor, but as an innovator following his own vision. I clicked through the attached photos. Lush Andean slopes covered with unfamiliar plants. A stone building with antique copper stills. Benjamin standing beside a petite Peruvian woman with intelligent eyes and a determined smile. In every image, my son looked more alive than I'd seen him in years. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. In the past, I might have immediately offered advice, suggestions, connections, trying to shape his vision to align with my expertise. But that was the old Margaret, the one who believed she knew best for everyone in her life. Instead, I wrote simply, Benjamin. It sounds perfect. Not because it involves essential oils, but because it makes your voice come alive in your writing in a way I haven't heard in years. This is what finding your own path looks like. I stepped down as CEO today. Amara is taking over. I'll be focusing solely on scent development moving forward. The creative work that brought me joy before spreadsheets and board meetings took over. Perhaps we're both finding our way back to what matters most. I'm here if you need anything, but mostly I'm just incredibly proud of you for following your heart. All my love, Mom. After sending the email, I remained on the terrace watching twilight settle over Georgetown. 6 months ago, I had been certain my life was set on an immutable course. I would run the company until Benjamin was ready to take over, then gracefully retire to an advisory role while he carried on the Wilcox legacy. Clara's betrayal had shattered that certainty, forcing both Benjamin and me to confront uncomfortable truths about the lives we'd been living and the assumptions that had governed our choices. The sound of the doorbell pulled me from my reflections. I wasn't expecting visitors, but David occasionally stopped by with takeout on board meeting days, a tradition we'd established years ago. Instead, when I opened the door, I found Detective Carter standing on my front steps. Mrs. Wilcox, he said. His formal demeanor softened somewhat after all we'd been through together. I apologize for coming by unannounced, but I thought you'd want to hear this in person rather than over the phone. I invited him in, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. Has something happened with Clara? Or Dr. Matthews? No, nothing like that, he assured me, following me to the living room. Actually, it's about your will. My will? I repeated, confused. Yes. During our investigation of Clara, we uncovered something that didn't make sense. He sat on the edge of my sofa, leaning forward intently. Clara repeatedly referred to a clause in your will that would grant her your entire estate if Benjamin died before you. That was her primary motive. Yes, I remember, I said, the memory of Clara's cold confession still vivid. What about it? Carter's expression was puzzled. Mrs. Wilcox, we obtained a copy of your actual will through the court order. There is no such clause in it. In fact, your will specifically states that if Benjamin were to predecease you, your estate would be divided between several charitable foundations, with only a modest provision for any spouse of his. I stared at him, struggling to process this information. But that's not possible. Clara specifically mentioned the clause. She said she'd seen the will. She claimed to have seen it, Carter corrected gently. But the document she described doesn't exist, at least not in any form. Filed with your attorney. A chill ran through me as the implications became clear. So her entire motive was based on a misunderstanding? Or a lie she told herself? It appears so, Carter confirmed. We believe Clara either misinterpreted something she overheard, or possibly was shown a draft that was never executed. Either way, she poisoned your son for an inheritance that was never coming to her. The bitter irony of it struck me like a physical blow. Benjamin had nearly died because of Clara's misguided belief about a document that didn't even exist in the form she imagined. After Detective Carter left, promising to update the prosecution with this new information, I sat alone in my living room, turning this revelation over in my mind. There was a terrible symmetry to it. Clara had destroyed her life and nearly taken Benjamin's based on an assumption that proved entirely false. Just as Benjamin and I had constructed our lives around expectations and assumptions that, when finally examined, crumbled under scrutiny. I reached for my phone and dialed Benjamin's international number, suddenly needing to hear his voice. When his familiar, "Hey Mom," came through the line, slightly distorted by distance but unmistakably warm, I felt tears spring to my eyes. "Benjamin," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "I have something important to tell you about Clara, about why she did what she did." As I shared Detective Carter's revelation, I realized that in this final twisted way, Clara had inadvertently given us a gift, forcing us to confront the danger of living lives built on untested assumptions and unexamined truths. 1 year to the day after Clara's arrest, I stood in a sun-drenched courtyard in Peru's Sacred Valley, surrounded by the sweet, herbaceous aroma of freshly distilled essential oils. The modest production facility, once abandoned, now thoughtfully restored, hummed with activity as local workers tended copper stills and carefully filtered precious droplets of oil into amber glass bottles. "What do you think?" Benjamin asked, appearing at my side. The Andean sun had bronzed his skin, and months of hiking through mountainous terrain had lent his frame a lean strength I hadn't seen since his college rowing days. But the most remarkable transformation was in his eyes. Clear, present, alight with purpose. "It's extraordinary," I said honestly. "Everything you've accomplished here in just 9 months." He smiled, gesturing toward a petite woman directing workers across the courtyard. "Lucia deserves most of the credit. She knew exactly what this place could become. She just needed a partner who believed in the vision." I watched Lucia Mendoza, the distillery owner's daughter who had become Benjamin's business partner and, more recently, something more, as she moved with confident precision through the facility. Her passion for preserving her father's legacy while creating sustainable opportunities for her community was evident in every aspect of the operation. "The first shipment to the U.S. goes out next week," Benjamin continued, leading me toward a small stone building that served as their office. "Our pre-orders exceeded projections by almost 40%. The interior of the office reflected the philosophy behind their business, ancestral essences. Simple, sustainable, deeply respectful of tradition, while embracing modern efficiency. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with a complex bouquet of unfamiliar scents. A sleek laptop sat incongruously on a hand-carved wooden desk beside. Leather-bound notebooks filled with generations of distillation knowledge. "I brought something for you," I said, placing a small package on the desk. "Consider it a belated housewarming gift." Benjamin unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a custom-blown glass vial with a platinum stopper, the same design we used for Marguerite's Essentials' most exclusive perfumes. "It's beautiful," he said, examining the intricate craftsmanship. "It's empty," I pointed out with a smile. "I thought perhaps you might fill it with your first signature blend." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You want to try one of our oils in your perfumes?" "If you're willing to collaborate," I confirmed. "Amara and I have been discussing a new direction for our premium line, emphasizing ethical sourcing and traditional knowledge. Your ancestral essences would be the perfect partner." He turned the empty vial in his hands, consideration in his expression. "Not as a Wilcox subsidiary," he said finally, "as equal partners with separate identities." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest at his firm boundaries. "Absolutely. That's exactly what we had in mind." Before he could respond, Lucia entered, bringing with her the bright energy that seemed to follow her everywhere. "Margaret, I hope Benjamin is giving you the full tour," she said in her lightly accented English, embracing me warmly. Over the past 6 months, during my 3 previous visits to Peru, we had developed a genuine affection for each other, initially connected by Benjamin, but increasingly through our shared passion for botanical extracts. "He's been showing me everything," I assured her. "It's more impressive each time I visit." Lucia beamed, then turned to Benjamin. "The Urubamba Cooperative is here. They've brought the first harvest of the mountain sage we discussed." "I'll be right there," he promised. When she'd gone, he turned back to me. "We'll talk more about the collaboration over dinner. The 3 of us have a lot to celebrate tonight." Something in his tone caught my attention. "Oh?" A slight flush colored his cheeks. I asked Lucia to marry me last night. She said yes. Joy bubbled up inside me. Pure, uncomplicated happiness for my son who had found his way to love again after such profound betrayal. Benjamin, that's wonderful. When did you decide? How did you? He laughed, holding up a hand to stem my flood of questions. I'll tell you everything tonight, but right now, those farmers have traveled 5 hours to get here, and they deserve my full attention. As he hurried to meet the cooperative members, I wandered out to the small garden behind the facility. Stone benches surrounded a medicinal herb garden where Lucia had recreated her father's original plant collection. I settled on a sun-warmed bench, breathing in the complex aroma of lavender, rosemary, and unfamiliar Andean herbs. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How's Peru? Amara's doing brilliantly here. Board approved new sustainability initiatives. Missing your input on the winter collection, though. I smiled, typing back. Peru is transformative. Benjamin's engaged. Tell Amara I'll be back next week for winter. Collection development. Maybe dinner when I return? Just us? David's response came quickly. Congratulations to Benjamin. And yes, to dinner. I've missed our conversations. The tentative romance developing between David and me over the past few months had been unexpected, a gentle evolution from friendship to something deeper, born from the shared trauma of discovering Clara's poisoning scheme and the subsequent rebuilding of our lives. At our age, we approach this new connection with a wisdom born of experience, neither rushing nor overthinking, simply enjoying each day as it came. My gaze drifted to the mountains surrounding the valley, their ancient slopes a reminder of how small our human dramas were against the backdrop of geological time. A year ago, I had been shattered by the revelation of Clara's betrayal, convinced that the foundation of my carefully constructed life had been irreparably damaged. Instead, from those broken pieces had emerged something stronger, more authentic, not just for me, but for Benjamin as well. The sound of laughter drew my attention back to the distillery, where Benjamin and Lucia were welcoming a group of weathered farmers carrying burlap, sacks of freshly harvested herbs. The respect and warmth in their interactions was visible even from a distance. This wasn't a transaction, but a collaboration, a shared vision taking root in fertile ground. That evening, we celebrated Benjamin and Lucia's engagement with a feast at their modest home on the edge of the village. Under strings of golden lights in their garden, surrounded by friends from the cooperative and neighboring farms, we toasted to new beginnings with glasses of local chicha. As the celebration continued around us, Benjamin pulled me aside, guiding me to a quiet corner of the garden. I have something for you, he said, presenting me with a small wooden box intricately carved with botanical motifs. We've been working on this for months. Inside the box lay 3 tiny vials of essential oil, each labeled in Lucia's elegant handwriting: Verdad, Truth, Transformación, Transformation, and Renacimiento, Rebirth. Our first signature collection, Benjamin explained, inspired by what we've all been through this past year. I carefully unstoppered the vial labeled Verdad, inhaling the complex aroma, bright citrus notes overlaid with something deeper, more grounding. It's extraordinary. We thought you might consider them for that collaboration we discussed, he said. Each blend tells part of our story, the painful truth that set us free, the transformation that followed, and the rebirth into new lives. Tears pricked at my eyes as I recapped the vial. It's perfect, Benjamin. All of it. I gestured to the celebration around us, to Lucia laughing. With her family, to the thriving business they'd built together. You've created something remarkable here. He smiled, the expression reaching all the way to his eyes in a way I hadn't seen since before Clara entered our lives. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. I think you give me too much credit. This was all you, finding your own path, following your own instincts. That's not what I meant, he said, his expression turning serious. After everything happened with Clara, you could have tightened your grip, become more protective, more controlling. Instead, you let me go. You gave me space to figure out who I am without the weight of expectations. He touched the wooden box in my hands. That gift of freedom is what made all of this possible. As we rejoined the celebration, I found myself reflecting on the strange, painful journey that had brought us to this moment. Clara's betrayal, born from her own twisted assumptions and greed, had nearly destroyed Benjamin. Yet from that darkness had emerged this new life, this authentic joy. Later that night, as I prepared for bed in the guest room of Benjamin and Lucia's home, I noticed a framed photo on the nightstand, Benjamin and me at his college graduation, both of us smiling into the camera, our future paths seemingly certain. Beside it sat a newer photo. Benjamin, Lucia, and me at the distillery's opening ceremony 6 months ago. Our faces alight with the particular joy that comes from building something meaningful from the ground up. 2 moments captured in time, bridged by a journey none of us could have anticipated. In the morning, I would begin preparations to return to Washington, to my redesigned role at Marguerite's Essentials, to dinners with David, to the new life I was crafting for myself. Benjamin would remain here with Lucia, nurturing their business and planning their wedding. Our lives would continue on separate continents, intersecting regularly through visits, video calls, and now this business collaboration. Yet despite the physical distance, I felt closer to my son than ever before, connected not by obligation or expectation, but by mutual respect and genuine understanding of who we truly were. As I drifted toward sleep, I recalled Clara's bitter words during her confession. If you hadn't been so controlling, so obsessed with your precious legacy, none of this would have happened. She had intended those words as a weapon, a final twist of the knife. Instead, they had become a catalyst for profound change, forcing me to examine the ways I had conflated love with control, protection with limitation. In the end, Clara's most poisonous action had yielded an unexpected antidote, the truth that set us all free. The true legacy wasn't Marguerite's Essentials, or the Wilcox name, or any material inheritance. It was this: the courage to release what we thought we needed to hold tight, the wisdom to recognize that love flourishes best in open hands, and the faith that when we allow those we cherish to follow their own paths, they often circle back to us in ways more beautiful than we could have planned. As Benjamin had written in the note accompanying his essential oil collection, the most precious inheritance isn't wealth or status or even wisdom. It's the freedom to discover your own truth and the courage to live it authentically. That freedom was the gift we had found in the aftermath of betrayal, the unexpected blessing born from our darkest hour.